Brought to you by Bolt.
Hey guys, it's Cinemills TV, and we've got a special for you. We're in downtown LA, the Arts District, and we're about to embark on a journey.
Yo, what's up, Cinemills TV? I'm Adam Saleh, and here's the studio. We're here at PresQ Studio. That's PresQ, not Presk.
So, Adam, tell us about the shoe that you have in your hand.
Yeah, so this is kind of a fun story, right? You know, back when this was first just a seed of an idea, this was the first shoe that we ever 3D printed. It's pretty rough. I had just, 3D modeled this myself with my own kind of limited skills. This was the first shoe that I showed Mikey when I was kind of pitching him on working on this with me together. Actually, right behind me is the first the first 3D printer I had in my apartment. This is like an artillery sidewinder, kind of a basic machine, bed slinger. And that's a lot of what we used for the early days of these prototypes. And I'll show you a little bit about how things have progressed.
Take us to the beginning process of this whole beautiful venture.
It was, how can we reduce the friction between the idea you have in your head, right? The idea you have in your head and something existing in tangible reality, and do that quickly. This has a lot to do with language too, kind of ideas start as what you call a lemma in the head, which is just like the basic kernel of an idea. I have an idea of a tree or an object or a shoe, and then it kind of progresses down this kind of like cognitive structure into an utterance, something that you say out loud. Hey, what if we mimic that same process for physical goods and not just language? And it made a lot of sense to start with shoes, because they're kind of ubiquitous, right? You're wearing shoes, everyone wears shoes, and it's kind of the most common thing that people get outside of a smartphone or something else that they'd carry, or apparel, which is, a really saturated industry. And so we thought we could make a really big impact with footwear. We're also just all sneakerheads, right? I've been collecting shoes for a while. I've been a fan of the industry, and we all just kind of have, what they call in the industry founder market fit when it comes to building a product in the footwear industry. And so that's what we get really excited about. But it all started here, kind of in my apartment on the kitchen table with this first 3D printed shoe before we really knew anything about how to make this work.
Let's go to the design element, man. Let's see how these things are designed from beginning.
Yeah, so if you kind of think of this as our past, what Mikey has here, Mikey's our head of design. He's one of the co-founders of PresQ. He has kind of the present sitting right here. This is a slide sandal that we designed, and he'll tell you a little bit about the process we used to make that product.
Adam found me on Instagram. I had been basically cranking out concepts every day, trying to get my foot into the footwear industry, and we grab lunch. And he takes this out of his backpack and he goes, yeah, so this is a shoe. And I look at him and I go, okay, we can do better. We can do better than this. And like, no hate or anything. But I also had never seen a shoe like this before in my life. And so immediately I was like, yes, let's take this and make it a real thing. So this kernel of an idea actually became the first shoe that we released, which was this guy, the Paradigm Zero. You can tell like the kernels of the design translated through, but it changed quite a bit over time, right? Here's another one. This is the EVA prototype. So this is not 3D printed. We want to, test out as many different manufacturing processes as we could, find the right one that would cater to our process. And EVA moves a little bit too slow. We're a little too fast for this manufacturing process.
Yeah, so we're sitting here with co-founder Mikey. Mikey, do you use SolidWorks or what are you running for software, bro?
Great question. So traditionally, usually industrial designers are trained in SolidWorks, Rhino. The one that I found that kind of let me do everything that I needed to do was Cinema 4D. So basically, this is the program I work in, Cinema 4D. This is a 3D model of the shoe. And basically how it happens is this right here is what is called a footwear last. This determines the silhouette and shape of the shoe, right? So you start with this, you drape materials traditionally over this, you nail it into the bottom, and this is what shapes the shoe when it's all said and done. And so we started with the last here, we sculpted it away, we added a midsole. That midsole is then trimmed, the last trims out from there to have space for your foot, add an outsole. I mean, it's all said and done after that. You print it, you iterate, oh, do we want a thicker midsole or do we want a softer upper? And then at the end of the day, we have something that looks a little something like this. Super comfy, super simple, but a different design. We wanted to take that traditional Burke clog style, but then add our flair. And from the beginning, right, our flair are these like pinched ridges, these cutouts, and we're pushing into this like these perforated patterns that kind of follow the contours of the surface. I think that's something we did very successfully here is we took a classic design and kept a lot of the design integrity of that inspiration while also pushing onto it our own design language.
No, it's a beautiful shoe. It's simple, but it has a sleek kind of look and form and aesthetic.
So right now we are moving at light speed every week. We're pushing for new designs. This is where we are right now. And where we're headed is beyond FDM and into DLP, which is a resin-based printing, but allows for a lot more of a variable density. So this allows you to do is rather than having these stacked layers of different materials that are glued together, we can drive variable density through parametric design, through this lattice that allows for everything to be printed in one material, in one go, but to have different levels of support and softness throughout the shoe.
How far away are we from creating a performance shoe, meaning a cleat, a soccer boot, a boxing shoe?
I don't think we're very far at all. I think some more development is all it takes. I would say we're on the verge of performance 3D printed shoes. And this is the first step, right? It's creating a very comfortable, but also functional footwear that anybody could use and wear and push their own abilities beyond the limits of what's possible right now.
So Adam, tell us about this shoe that you have in your hand.
Yeah, so really quick, this is an interesting one. I was telling you earlier, we make a bunch of these, design tools, right? One of those tools is an AI design tool. This is kind of interesting because this was made with like a sentence, right? This was made with an idea, basically like, I want a kind of coral dunk-like shoe that kind of has like a Nemo colorway. And then the computer kind of spits this out and then we're able to 3D print it. So again, these machines are not constrained to just one material. I know we've been showing you a lot of these single material prints, but we can do up to 4 or 5 colors. And so this was kind of a cool experiment. This probably won't go to market, but you can tell it's kind of familiar, right? It looks like a Dunk or an AF1 or something like that. And that's because a lot of the images of shoes are out, that are out on the internet that we're kind of scraping data from. A lot of that comes from Nike. And so what we do in-house is we build our own designs. And so next time when you generate a shoe, it's something that kind of looks brand new, kind of like what we've been showing you with the shoe that Mikey had and some of our other silhouettes. But this was a really cool test, a really cool proof of concept. And again, kind of a signal of the future. And so this is what we're really excited about in some of our previous experiments, but we're moving forward from this right now.
Do you see the world going into a more individual expression as it relates to fashion?
Yeah, like my big thesis, design is a language, right? Just like any other language. Cinnamills, you even said when we were chatting earlier, the kind of design you see in Japan varies from the kind of design you see in the Middle East, from South America, and it tracks with language, right? And we want to honor that and respect that. And I think a lot of what PresQ is about is breaking down these big industry monoliths. You know, a lot of people go to a Nike or an Adidas and they see like the same silhouette across any geographic area. And I think that's really cool. You know, it's a legacy product. It tells a legacy story. But I think a lot of people are ready for something new. They want something that tells their unique story, just like the way that they tell their own story through language. And so that's something that we think about a lot. In terms of the other ways we think about linguistics, it's also kind of technical, right? So all of y'all have probably used, ChatGPT or Claude or something like that. And design is kind of changing from this, really operational skill where you kind of get in front of a computer, you use a keyboard and mouse, you're on the Adobe suite, you're 3D modeling, you're audio mixing, whatever, you're using Fruit Loops, Logic, whatever, to being this really discursive process, right? I go on ChatGPT, I basically have a conversation with it and I'm designing an outcome. And so we think a lot about how language is going to be a new interface for design. And so we think about it philosophically, how, design and language changes geographically across the world, but we also think a lot about how it changes the way that we interact with these tools.
The shoe in your hand, I would describe as a clog, right?
Oh, for sure.
And tell us give us some of the variables as you think of the design, from the aesthetic to the actual, application, if you will.
We wanted to go for a unisex, lightweight, unibody design that anybody could resonate with. The inspiration for the shoe was a Birkenstock, which is very popular and is known for its simplicity, right? We've got the upper here, which is what goes over your foot. We've got the midsole, and then we have the outsole. They all have different densities in the lattice, which allow for different levels of comfort. Where you want stability, we have stability. Where you want softness, we have softness. Obviously, a plastic shoe is not going to be breathable, so we need to make sure there is perforation. So these holes allow for breathability when you're walking or just chilling in these shoes.
Can you take those down to the beach? Will salt water corrode that material, or is it pretty durable?
It's pretty durable. It's important to user test our shoes. These are fresh. We did a shoot off in a desert location and they held up. So I'm confident to say, you take these down to the beach and you're going to be just fine.
And it seems like in the world we live in, everyone has access to the same technology. So it's almost like design has become open domain. Is that a fair statement?
Oh, for sure. I mean, to see what the kids are designing in Blender and Cinema 4D these days, it's insane. I was still sculpting in Play-Doh when I was their age. So I think technology is definitely pushing and advancing our abilities and the accessibility of design.
Right, and we talked to Adam a little bit about the customization, the bespoke nature of additive manufacturing and localized manufacturing. Do you feel that this personal expression is going to be the future?
For sure. I think more and more often, people want to buy the things that their friends are creating, that their friends are designing, and less so the big whales, right? The Nikes, the Pumas, the Adidas of the world. I hate to say it, but at a certain point, when you get a certain size, you lose touch with what the user may actually want. Recently, it is a lot about self-expression, self-identity. People want shoes that are unique to their unique story. And I think that's something we do really well at PresQ is we take that story, we take their unique tastes and their styles, and we can imbue that into a shoe, into a product that is unique to them.
So this is killer, Adam. Tell us where we're walking over to now. Is this where all the magic happens?
Yeah, so this is where all the magic happens. We have a theme going on here. So you see all the machines, they're named after Star Trek characters. We're big fans of sci-fi here at PresQ Studio. But the main event here is our print deck. At one point, this was meant to be a manufacturing facility. You could imagine a big factory with a bunch of these U-line, utility racks stacked up. And what we have on here is multi-tool head FDM 3D printers. FDM is fused deposition modeling. You can kind of imagine it like a hot glue gun on a robot arm. And we use those to print everything from home goods to fashion accessories but we specialize in footwear. And so that's what we have going on here.
It starts with the raw material. And where do you store that?
Yeah, so we actually got all our raw material here right behind me. What you're looking at here is TPE, thermoplastic elastomer. It's kind of like a soft, kind of rubbery plastic. We also have PVA, polyvinyl alcohol. What's cool about that is usually when you're supporting a print, you can't just print something without any supports unless you're printing it flat. And so when you're printing something kind of vertical like this, again, you have to have support interface. And so we use polyvinyl alcohol to do that. And what's cool about that material is it actually dissolves in water. We don't have to really do this for our prints. We haven't had to, do it in the past, but what you can do is you basically take the whole print off the print plate, you put it into a tub of water with a little agitator, and all that support material just dissolves off. And so that's kind of the main material we use, TPE and PVA. We also do resin printing. One of our partners is a company called Carbon. They use a process called DLS, a lot more expensive, a lot more complicated, but yields really amazing footwear, really amazing technology, and proven with a lot of different applications over the last 5-10 years. But we do all that manufacturing up in the Bay. There's a lot of ways we think about sustainability. TPE is a little bit more transparent when it comes to sustainability. We're still kind of looking at sustainable outcomes with the other manufacturing technologies. One of the cool things about TPE is it's what you call a thermoforming material, meaning when you apply heat to it, it doesn't change its molecular state. And what that means is the material you see on the filament spool is the same state as the material in the shoe. What that means is you can grind the shoe down and essentially re-extrude it into new shoes, new parts. The difficulty is we haven't actually done that yet. You need to collect a bunch of material en masse and then send it to a processing facility. We haven't collected enough source material or enough reclaimed material to do that. But we definitely have plans to do that in the future. So essentially recyclable shoes. One of the other implications though of sustainability that we're really excited about is the fact that it's domestic, it's local, right? So not only is this made in the USA, but you can imagine this is a portable manufacturing technology, right? And so what that means is, imagine a world where you have these machines next to your washer dryer, and no longer do you need to order something from overseas and have it shipped across the Atlantic or the Pacific or whatever. You can build it in the, in the comfort of your own home. And what that means is you're cutting down on supply chain bloat. You have less of these 18-wheelers carrying products across the United States, across the state, and you can produce locally. And so that has all sorts of implications on sustainability. It has all sorts of implications on, giving creative capital back to the people that it originates from. And so that's one of the really beautiful things about 3D printing and additive manufacturing.
And is there limitations on color variations, or has the filament gotten a wide spectrum of color?
We have a pretty wide spectrum of color. I mean, we've ordered custom colors. You can get any kind of Pantone you want. Obviously, you can tell if you look around, we have a lot of orange in here, so we love orange. That's kind of our company color. But we do pink, yellow, white, transparent, all kinds of stuff. These machines particularly can print up to 5 colors. It's really 4 because we're using one of those colors just to print the support material, the PVA, but it leads to a lot of cool outcomes. We can do multicolored shoes, not just one color. And then of course there's post-processing, right? Like you can always paint a shoe, you can always print directly on the shoe. You can do a water dip, any of that kind of stuff if you want to get variation in the color and the silhouette. We're also making optimizations in the materials themselves. I'm not a material scientist, so I can't really speak to that, but that's something else that we work on. We're also doing a lot with the G-code, right? And so the G-code is kind of like the schematic that we feed into the printer with a file, with an SD card. And you can imagine it as like a coordinate system that little, hot glue gun on a robot arm follows layer after layer to make the shoe. And so a lot of the optimization and our yields and how the shoe feels comes from innovating the G-code, that kind of source geometry that ends up with the shoe that you have in hand. The shoes I'm wearing right now are 3D printed by us. These were pretty optimized. We went through a bunch of iterations. And again, a lot of the innovation happens on the data side.
And I notice a lot of the infill density is a lattice structure. Is that proprietary to PresQ, or is that kind of an open domain?
We use both, right? So we have proprietary computational lattices. This is stuff that we're, building with mathematical equations and algorithms that determines that internal structure. We also use off-the-shelf lattices, right? So the lattice we're using with these FDM machines is pretty standard. It's called a gyroid lattice. It deforms pretty equally in every direction, which is nice to get that, that kind of sensation that mimics foam. If you want me to add a little bit more science here, natural foam is what you call stochastic. So if you're going to look at it under a microscope, you have all these kind of randomized cells in there. And what that allows you to do is have this kind of consistent deformation in any direction. And so again, what we're doing is we're using math and we're creating these computational lattices to have something that kind of mimics that natural quality of a foam. And again, we're using a gyroid lattice for that.
Do you have a software that scans your customers' feet?
We haven't gone there yet. There are vendors on the market that offer, software as a service products that help people scan their feet and get custom shoes printed. Sometimes it's for orthotic applications. If you have, a raised heel or something like that, or if you have foot issues. We haven't dove into that quite yet, but it's something that we have on the horizon. Basically doing, custom scanned shoes or custom scanned feet, so we can do custom shoes, custom insoles, that kind of thing.
We've noticed Adidas has kind of also stepped into the 3D printed game.
Yeah.
Would PresQ be also a solution for major shoe manufacturers to utilize your backbone?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we share a few partners with Adidas, particularly on the additive side of things. Again, it's a cutting edge market, right? On Running came out with light spray. That's a kind of FDM technology similar to this, but they had a bunch of custom mechatronics they used for that. We do work with a lot of footwear companies on innovation projects, right? That's one of the, kind of functions of this business. And a big thing that you get or a big advantage that you get from additive manufacturing is toolless production. And so toolless production basically means usually you got to create these big, steel or aluminum tools that are milled usually in the East. Again, you got to send them overseas. It's really expensive and it's really time consuming, right? And so one of the really brilliant things you get from this technology is you get a lot more variation in the design with a lot less costs that you got to amortize in the cost of the shoe. So you can get a lot more shoes out quickly. You can change designs on the fly. You can go to market. For us, it takes us, under a month to bring a new shoe to market. Typical footwear companies, you're looking at, 12 to 18 months oftentimes. And so we get a lot of advantages from that. And of course, larger footwear companies are always interested in tapping into this technology.
And you mentioned efficiencies. These are all made to order. How long does a shoe take to actually print out?
It really depends. I mean, you can probably tell, these prints are going pretty slow. For a really small shoe, again, depends on the size. If you have a size 12 versus a size 5, that's going to be a pretty large variance in the print time. You're looking at anywhere from, 9 to 10 hours for a small shoe up to, 12 to 18 hours for let's say a size, 11 or 12. That's with this FDM technology. With the other resin-based technologies like digital light synthesis, SLA printing, you can look at anything from 1 to 3 hours for sometimes multiple shoes on one printer. In terms of where we hope this company is going and the partnerships that we're building today, we want to get into resin printing because you save a lot of time, you save a lot of money, and oftentimes the shoes have a longer lifespan. So that's something that we think about a lot. We're actually kind of in the middle of an expansion right now. We want to bring in more machines in-house. Again, these are really slow machines, and so it kind of limits the amount of quantity we can go to market with. And so a lot of what we invest in is building out our print farm, building partnerships with other 3D printing and additive manufacturing, original equipment manufacturers, OEMs. And so we're constantly thinking about expansion there. But we actually kind of prefer when we scale a launch to work with one of our partner manufacturers. So what you'll see is we'll do a lot of prototypes here. we'll do low run manufacturing in-house. And then when we want to scale into the hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, we'll kind of defer to one of our partner manufacturers.
Do you believe that this is the future of local manufacturing?
Yeah, this is totally the future of local manufacturing. To me, it's kind of the only way, right? And a lot of that is these machines are portable, right? So again, you can put them in your home, you can spin up these micro factories. Imagine having one of these in the back of a retail facility. You go in, you buy a shoe, you kind of have like a Santa's workshop, like a Build-A-Bear workshop experience. You go in, you talk to someone like Mikey, he's able to design your shoe on the fly. You walk out at the end of the day with something brand new, or maybe even in just a couple of hours. And so the future of domestic production really looks like this. And this technology is advancing quickly, right? It's not as fast as what we're seeing with AI because you're constrained by physics, really, right? You're still working with the kinematics of having a bunch of stepper motors in these machines, but the technology is improving quickly. And AI has something to do with that too, with reducing error rates, with improving yield, making the prints faster. And so again, the future looks like this. And that's why we have these Star Trek names, right? Like that's always a reminder of why we're here. We're kind of think of like the Star Trek replicator, right? The Star Trek replicator was this vision of, I can walk up to this machine kind of like a microwave and I can type something in. I want popcorn, I want a deck of cards, I want a coffee mug, and it does its magic and you have that thing right in front of you. We're getting there with this.
Speaking of customization, do you have customers that will submit their own designs and ask you guys to fulfill and print and manufacture?
We do one-of-one customs. We work with artists, musicians, athletes. Sometimes they have a design ready to go. Sometimes Mikey will help them design the shoe. And, really that's the spirit of all of this, right? Is we want to engage the end consumer in the design process. We think that that's super important and just building the story behind the product and not just having something that's nameless, faceless, storyless. And so again, another advantage of the technology is we can do stuff like that at cost, and it makes a lot of sense for us. But yeah, we do a lot of customs. So this has been Adam Saleh. We're here at PresQ. I'm here with my co-founders, Steve and Mikey. Thanks for joining us. Make sure to find us on Instagram at PresQ, that's PRESQ.studio. Catch up with us, design a shoe with us, and thanks for Cinemills TV for coming and checking us out. Appreciate you guys.